Namaste, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Indic Talks organized by Center for Indic Studies. Today we will be talking about Advaita Vedanta. It is a Hindu school of philosophy that focuses on what ideas of moksha, non-duality, Satchit, Anand, and more can be deciphered to be. And we have Arvind Sharma ji with us, who is a Berks Professor of Comparative Religion in the School of Religious Studies at McGill University. He will be delineating what Advaita Vedanta means and its basic principles. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to take over from here.
Thank you. So this is a lecture on, or rather this is going to be a lecture on Introduction to Advaita Vedanta. I'd like to begin by examining the key terms Advaita and Vedanta. And out of these, I will take up the word Vedanta first for examination. So we ask the question, what is Vedanta? The word Vedanta is made up of two other words, Ved and Anta. Anta means end, and Ved is the name given to the body of revealed texts in Hinduism, which are called the Veda. When they are published, they take the form of a book, which you can hold in your hand, and that would be the Veda. If you open that book, you will have an early portion of it and the end portion of it. The end portion of it will be the Ant, the end of that book. So Vedanta means that portion of the scripture called Veda, which comes towards the end. This section of the Veda, which constitutes the end portion of the Veda, is therefore called Vedanta. The other name by which it is known is the word Upanishad. So the word Vedanta and the word Upanishads have fundamentally the same meaning. Now these last sections of the Veda are supposed to represent the culmination of the evolution of Vedic thought. Let me provide an illustration of this. Very early in the Vedas, in the very first portion, called the Sanhita or the mantra portion, there is a line which says, what was the wood? What was the tree out of which the gods made heaven and earth? This is a question raised at the beginning of the Vedas. The Vedas evolve and grow from the mantra portion into the Brahmana portion, from the Brahmana portion into the portion called the Aranyakas, and finally from the Aranyakas into the Upanishads. In the Upanishads, we find the line, Brahman was the wood, Brahman was the tree, out of which the gods made heaven and earth. Brahman here stands for the ultimate reality. What I'm trying to indicate is that the tradition felt that the answers which were raised at the beginning of the tradition were, in the judgment of the tradition, answered in the last sections of the Veda, or the Vedanta, or the Upanishads. In this way, the Vedanta represents the culmination of the Vedic tradition. This is why they are considered so important. Now, these texts are not in the form of a textbook. In a textbook, like a textbook on, say, philosophy, Western philosophy, you will have a description of all the various systems of Western thought in a systematic, probably chronological order. But these books are not the works of scholars, but of religiously inspired sages, seers, and saints. Upanishad, the word itself is very revealing. The word shad means to sit. It is related to the English word sit, which is what we are doing at the moment, sitting in our chairs. Upani means up close. So those teachings which were given when the disciples sat up close to the master is one meaning we can give to the term Upanishad. So these are teachings given by masters. These are not questions answered by professors. In other words, they are inspired utterances. And the Upanishads are a treasure house of such utterances. Those who came after the Upanishads and studied them tried to organize them into a system. And this is how the various systems of Vedanta arose. There are several such systems of Vedanta which try to answer the question, what is the final message, the ultimate message of the Upanishads? As a first step, we made the statement, the Upanishads contain the answers to the questions asked earlier. Now we ask the question, what are these answers given by the Upanishads? What is the final answer of the Upanishads? Now, because the Upanishads are not like textbooks or lectures in a university, but utterances of seers and saints, inspired people, they themselves do not, in the Upanishads, appear as a system. Those who study them try to systematize the teachings of the Upanishads. One such attempt is known as the Brahma Sutra. So the Brahma Sutra is a text which tries to establish some kind of an order, systematic order, in the teachings of the Upanishads. Brahma Sutra. So we have first the Upanishads, then the Brahma Sutra. Then we have a third text, and this is the Bhagavad Gita, which was considered the word of God. These three texts were accepted by the people who came in the tradition later on as the fundamental texts of Vedanta. These three texts, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita. Now the question arises, what then is the final teaching of these texts? And the attempt to arrive at these final teachings gave rise to various schools of Vedanta. One of the basic questions which arises in this context is, what is the nature of the ultimate reality called Brahman? Brahman is often referred to as Sachidanand in this literature. The word Satchidanand is made up of three terms: Sat, Chit, and Anand. Sat means true or real. Chit means consciousness or awareness. And Anand means bliss. So when Brahman is described as Satchidanand, and on this, all these schools of Vedanta has agreed that the ultimate reality is Brahman and it is Satchidanand. So let us examine the meaning of the term Satchidanand. The best way, or one of the good ways rather, of examining the meaning of this term is to take it in the form of answers given to the questions which will naturally arise if we start talking about an ultimate reality. The first question which is going to arise is, well, you are saying there is an ultimate reality. Is it real? I mean, is it an abstraction? Or does it really exist? And then, if there is an ultimate reality, is it just one or is it many? And even before that, if there is an ultimate reality, what is it like? Is it like a physical law, like the law of gravitation, that is material in nature? Or is it immaterial, like a principle, an ideal? And then, is it one or many? Now, the expression Satchidanand is supposed to answer these questions. The first answer is, if you ask the question, is Brahman only a conception, only an abstraction? Or does it refer to something real? The answer is it is real, Sat. Then you ask the question, if we accept this claim that Brahman is for real, is it something like material or something immaterial? The answer is Chit. It is more like something immaterial, like awareness, consciousness, than something material, like a table or a chair or an atom. And then you ask, is this ultimate reality one or many? The word Anand is supposed to indicate that it is one. Because if there were two, they would compete among themselves. And that would not allow for bliss. So in this way, when Brahman is described as Sat Chit Anand, we are claiming that it is the sole spiritual reality. We get the soul from Anand, spiritual from Chit, and reality from Sat. Now the question is, this ultimate reality, described as Satchidanand, does it possess certain attributes, empirical attributes, like a person, like you and I are persons, we have distinct characteristics. Is it like that? Or is it something without characteristics, uniform, seamless, like the sky? On this point, there's a major difference of opinion among the interpreters of the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita. When we talk of distinctions, it means there are two elements in perception. Somebody who perceives the difference and the difference. The Advaita school of Vedanta maintains that the ultimate reality is without distinctions. It is not two. Advaita. It does not deny that this ultimate reality may have a dimension, an aspect, which can be called saguna, as having distinct characteristics. But the ultimate nature of this ultimate reality is without distinctions. It is nirguna. Now, the question then is, how do we understand this, the idea of nirguna? So, let me provide an illustration. We are probably sitting in a chair in front of a table. So we have these material objects, chair, table. They have features of length, breadth, density, height. So let us call them gunas. So our experience of these material objects can be described as saguna, with distinguishing characteristics. But where do these objects exist? They exist in space. In a room, you have these objects in your space. Can we say that space has length, breadth, height, density? No. We can call space nirguna in relation to the material objects. Now, consider the paradox. Space does not have length, breadth, etc. But all objects which possess these things exist in space. This is the kind of picture Advaita Vedanta tries to draw for us about the ultimate reality and our relation to it. So there are various schools of Vedanta, that is, various attempts to establish what is the ultimate nature of the ultimate reality, which the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita talk about. On this, there is a division of opinion within the philosophical schools. Those who claim that that reality is more like space, which is the same everywhere. Space has no distinctions, though all distinctions exist in space. That is Nirguna Brahman, or Brahma, according to Advaita Vedanta. That is the ultimate reality. And the goal of life is to have an experience of that ultimate reality. When we have that ultimate reality, we achieve moksha, or the ultimate goal of life, or liberation, or salvation, or nirvana, whatever we might wish to call it. In order to achieve this, Advaita Vedanta lays down a whole discipline which one has to follow to achieve that realization. So the rest of my presentation now will be concerned with outlining this method of achieving the realization of this reality in this school of thought. One begins by where one is. We are in this world performing various actions, living in a household, going to the office, or on our various occupations which we might be pursuing. We start with them. This step is called Karma Yoga. Normally, we perform our actions with some end in mind, with some goal in mind, with some motive behind them. We want to raise a family. That is why we lead family life. We want to earn our salary. That is why we pursue our occasions or earn a living, if not a salary. We perform our action normally in life on the basis of the things we want in life. If, however, we continue performing these actions, but in doing so are motivated not by the idea that performing these actions will bring us certain rewards, like a family or an income, but out of the idea that we are performing these actions because it is our duty to do so. Then they become actions of Karma Yoga. When these actions are performed with motives in mind of a worldly kind, then they bind us to the world. Then karma is a bondage. But when these actions are performed in a different spirit, the spirit of duty, then these very actions lead us towards the ultimate reality. Then they become Karma Yoga, not just karma. As the saying goes, God cares for the adverb and not the verb. Not about what we are doing, but how. That is the spirit in which we are doing it. When we start acting like this, our mind starts getting purified. When the mind then becomes purified, then it is ready to venture further on the path. The next step on this path is called Sadhan Chatushtai, or the set of 4 means which one has to acquire. The first one, I'll use code words for them. The first word is called Vivek. The second one is called Vairagya. The third is called Shat Sampat. And the final one is called Mumukshutva. Let me now explain these terms. The first one is called Vivek. That is discrimination, which is defined as the ability to distinguish between the permanent and the impermanent. When we look at the world, we want certain positive experiences from this world. But if we look at the world carefully, we find that it is impermanent. So that any happiness we will achieve in this world will be temporary. Because the world is changing all the time. And we are changing all the time. When it happens to be a happy alignment between the way the world is and the way we are happy. But because the world is changing, the very moment we feel we are aligned is the moment when we are getting out of alignment. We don't realize this. But if the world is changing, then this is bound to happen. So this is the ability to distinguish between the permanent and the impermanent. The permanent is the ultimate reality. Everything in this world is impermanent, and therefore cannot be a source of final happiness. This is Vivek. Then the next one is Vairagya or detachment. Once we realize this, we tend to become detached from the world in the sense that we realize that nothing in this world can really bring us permanent happiness, and therefore we begin to become detached from it. We start giving up the desires for the things of the world. So just as Vivek is defined in the tradition as Nitya-Nitya Vivek, the ability to discriminate between the permanent and the impermanent, Vairagya is described as Ihamutra Phaltyag, the absence of any desire for anything in this world or the next, meaning even in heaven, because that is also temporary. So the first step is Vivek, which leads to Vairagya. Then the third step is Shat Sampat, 6 qualities we have to generate within ourselves. The first of them is called Shama, quietness, being at peace. Not allowing dispersing thoughts, feelings, emotions to arise. The next is Dham. Dham is the ability to suppress, to control these disturbing feelings when they do arise in the mind. So Sham is having the ability to be quiet, and Dham is the ability to control disturbances which might be arising to disturb that peace. Third is Uparati, that is withdrawing the senses from the fields of the senses. If we see things, the mind goes out and it starts enjoying the things it sees. Closing the eyes is Uparati, withdrawing the sense from the sense fields. So we have Sham, we have Dham, we have Uparati, we have Titiksha. Titiksha is patience. So the conclusions which Advaita Vedanta offers regarding the ultimate reality can be disturbing. We say, why? We are different from other people. An object is different from another object. And you are telling me that ultimately all this is one single seamless reality? How can that be? So the patience to stay with these ideas. The situation is described with the help of a metaphor in the tradition. If you are standing by a lake and looking at the lake, you see the reflection of the moon. But if the waves are choppy in that lake, you will see the moon into 1,000 slivers as radiant pieces scattered all along. If the surface becomes totally calm, then you will say, oh my God, this is just one single effulgent moon. But to realize that, one has to be patient enough to allow the waves to subside. So you have Sham, you have Dam, you have Uprati, you have Titiksha. Then you have Samadhi, the ability to concentrate the mind, to absorb the teachings. One is reminded of the famous episode in the Mahabharata when Drona is accused of being partial to Arjuna. And so Drona says that there's a reason why I'm partial to him. And I'll show it to you. All of you stand here, Duryodhan, Yudhishthir, all the Pandavas, Kauravas. And he has a pigeon placed on a branch of a tree, a clay pigeon. And he asks all of them to take aim. He first calls Yudhishthira, take aim. What do you see? Oh, I see you, I see the tree, I see the leaves. He says, okay. Duryodhana, what do you see? And he describes the scene. Then he calls Arjuna, what do you see? And Arjuna says, I see the neck of the pigeon. This is concentration. And finally, you have faith. But one must be very careful in understanding the meaning of faith here. Because normally when we talk about faith, we take it to mean faith in things unseen. Things we have no proof of, we can't see, but we believe. This idea of faith is found in those systems of religion, both in India and outside, in which the fruits of the religious life are received after our death, as in Christianity, as in Judaism, as in Christianity, as in Islam, as in various schools of devotionalism and Hinduism. But in Advaita Vedanta, you have the concept of Jivan Mukti, becoming Mukti, a realized being while alive. So faith here is not faith in things unseen. Faith here is enough faith to carry out the method, to see the result. I'll give you an example. You go to your chemistry class, the professor says, water consists of two gases. You say, what? Water is liquid. He says, I'll show you. So he conducts the famous experiment of Cavendish. And water turns into two gases before your eyes. This you don't take on faith. This is the truth revealed before your eyes. But you must have enough faith to carry out the experiment. Similarly, you must have enough faith to go through the steps of the method to make the realization in this life, as you are, with your body and mind. So the first requirement of the four means of the sadhan chatushta, the four means of realization, in a way, vivek, vairagya, and the six qualities, shabdam, uprati, titiksha, samadhi, and shuddha. Finally, the desire for liberation. You must want to be liberated from the troubles of the world, or you must want to know the ultimate reality. Because you can have all the other qualities, but if you don't have the desire to know the ultimate reality, then in the context of realization, you become irrelevant. This Mumukshutva is very important. As a matter of fact, a very well-known Muslim scholar, Al-Biruni by name, who flourished in the 11th century, wrote a book on India, translated into English as Al-Biruni's India. And therein it discusses the way to acquire moksha and who can acquire moksha. And he says Hindus have various opinions about this, but then he says the philosophers are agreed that there is only one thing you require, finally, to achieve perfection. That your desire for it be perfect. Total, complete. This is Mumukshutva. When you have this desire, then you go to a teacher and ask him, do you know what the ultimate reality is? He says, yes. He tells you the truths of the Upanishads. This stage is called Shravan, or audition, listening to the ultimate teaching. Let me backtrack a bit to describe to you how this ultimate teaching was arrived at. So I'll digress a bit, but I think it is important for us to do that at this moment. In the Upanishads, what are the Upanishads? Upanishads, there is a search for the ultimate, and it takes two forms. The ultimate ground of this universe, right in front of us, and the ultimate ground of our own being. Who are we? And what is this universe? What is this universe? We are sitting in a room. What explains this room? The building. What explains this building? The locality. What explains the locality? The city. What explains the city? The province. What explains the province? You go on like this. You will come to the countries, you will come to the globe, you will come to the solar system. You keep going on like that. Finally, you end up with the ultimate ground of the universe, which they call Brahman. This was one route they took. Then others took another route. What is the ultimate reality about us? Are we the body? Are we the brain? Are we the heart? Are we the mind? Are we consciousness? What are we? This journey took them to the ultimate ground of our being, which they identified as Atman. Then they made the sensational discovery that the ultimate ground of our being and the ultimate ground of the universe are identical. They are not two Advaita. It is not as if two things were made one. They were never apart from each other, undivided. This is the teaching he gives you. But you say, my God, this is contrary to my experience. Manan, you reflect on it. Could it be true? Could it be a state of realization in which there is neither me nor the universe? Well, you think, what happens in sleep? Neither I am present, nor the world is present. But I do experience it. So you reflect to make the ultimate reality, statement about the ultimate reality, plausible to yourself. This is the second stage. The first is called Shravana. The second is called Manana. Now you are ready for the third stage, which is called Dhyan. then you immerse yourself in these teachings to this so deeply that they become a part of your experience. And when you have the experiential realization of this identity, then you become liberated. You become mukta. You become a jivan mukta. And you have achieved the goal of human life in this very life, according to this system. This very briefly is a system of thought known as Advaita Vedanta. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. You have exposed us to this oceanic knowledge, and it's been quite a privilege to have listened to it. There are a few questions that I do want to ask you, and that is when we would wrap up the session. So, for a layman practicing Hindu, who is involved in polytheistic activities, in Murti Pujan, and all of this, how does one try and attempt to make a collective amalgam of all these ideas and all these different schools of philosophies, including that of Advaita Vedanta?
Yeah. First of all, I'm not happy with the use of the word polytheistic by you.
Okay.
Hinduism is monotheistic.
Mhm.
It doesn't say that there are many gods. It says that God can appear in many forms
Mhm.
or can be approached in many forms. Yeah. It is polymorphic, not polytheistic. Yeah. But to answer your question now, there's a famous account which is found in probably in Adhyatma Ramayana and in some of the hymns in praise of Hanumanji. One of these, the context is that Ram once asked Hanuman, "Who do you think I am? And who do you think you are? And what is your relationship to me?" And Hanuman says, Deha buddhya tu dasosmi. When I consider myself as the body, I am your servant. When I Deha buddhya tu dasosmi, jiva buddhya tu dhanshaka. When I consider myself as a psychophysical agent possessing a soul, I am part of you. When I think of myself as a body, I am your servant. When I think of myself as a soul, I am part of you. Atma drishtya tamevaham. But when I think of myself as the Atman, I am you. This is my considered opinion. This verse summarizes three basic schools of Vedanta: Advaita Vedanta, Vishishta Vedanta, and Dvaita Vedanta in relation to the individual.
So when we talk about the Tripura Rahasya, it talks about Tripura Sundari and how she is the beginning of Trimurti or the creator of Trimurti. So if we are to understand that, could we say that Tripura Sundari could be the personification of the Brahman? Or how exactly do we decipher that particular text?
Yes, so okay. So we have Brahman as the ultimate reality, right? Brahman can be viewed in two ways: as Nirgun Brahma or as Sagun Brahma. When we view it as Sagun Brahma, we can view it either as a male or a female. When we view it as a male, it becomes Ishwar. When it viewed as a female, it becomes Devi. When we view it as a Devi, we get tantric texts. And Tripura Sundari is one of them. In Hinduism, is perhaps the only religious system in the world in which the ultimate reality is identified as a female principle. Independent female principle. When you think of it in female terms, you get the whole system of Tantra. When you look at it in male terms, you get Ishvara, and you get the three forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and so on. So it's the Tripura can thus be placed within the larger Hindu world.
Sir, in the beginning of the lecture, you had spoken of how Brahman is the tree where it all started. So, if we talk about the Samudra Manthan and the beginning of life in that context, how does that come together?
Now, this comes into the realm of this world, Brahmand. Now, we are no longer talking of the ultimate reality. We are now talking of the expression of that ultimate reality in the world as we live it. Yeah? And on this, Advaita Vedanta has nothing special to offer as a system. It has a lot to tell us about how this world relates to the ultimate reality. But it does not wish to concern itself too much with the reality of the world, except as giving us a way of moving out of it. Other forms of Hinduism, like the Puranas, they spend more time in talking about the world, how it came into being, and so on, which are not rejected by Advaita Vedanta, but they are not its concern.
So, sir,
Ultimate,
when we talk about Buddha and his teachings, there are often sources that reveal that it was the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that he used to use and quote in order to spread his teachings around. So, oftentimes, when we talk about how Buddhism, Jainism, and other Indian origin religions have come out of Hinduism, can we say that Buddhism is, in a way, an expression or a manifestation of just this one particular school of thought being the premise upon which it is set?
well, this is a difficult question. I have a whole paper on that. Some people have books on it. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But let me try to place it in a broader context. Well, let me share with you my view of it. I think that's the best way of doing it. There are many views on this. My view on it is this. I take my cue from physics. In physics, there's a lot of discussion on what is the ultimate nature of light. Is it a wave or is it a particle? Sometimes sometimes light behaves like a particle. When it hits an object, it releases photons in that other object, which is the behavior of particles. But when it spreads like a wave. So, it's a great debate in physics. But the point is, it is light. Sometimes some aspects of its behavior are best explained on the model of a particle. Some aspects of it are best explained on the model of a wave. We are dealing with the ultimate reality in Hinduism and Buddhism. Similarly, the ultimate reality can be explained in more than one useful way. The reality is the reality, light is light, and enlightenment is enlightenment in both. But one school believes that some aspects of it are better explained by regarding it as Brahman and Atman, right? Another school believes that is something eternal, permanent, and all. Another school believes that some aspects of it are best explained by regarding it as impermanent. And that is Buddhism. And so it is really quite futile to fight over this. And let me explain why. Because both Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism warn you never to confuse map with territory. Advaita Vedanta is a map, is an intellectual formulation. Buddhism is a map. It's an intellectual formulation. Some maps may be helpful in some ways, others in other ways, depending on where we want to go and how we want to describe it. And so both of them are self-limiting systems. Shankara says, if you have read all these scriptures and not realized, your life is wasted. And if you have realized, your studies are wasted. He's trying to convey through this paradox the point, I think he's trying to cover the point I'm trying to make. The real point is the realization. Buddhism is a famous sermon in which the Buddha says, asks his monks, do you cling to these views? And they say, no. And then he says, do you hold these views? And they say, yes. What is he trying to say? These views are meant to lead you to a certain realization. If you cling to them, you are getting stuck to the pedal, to the bar of the ladder, instead of going up the ladder. If you become dogmatic about the teaching, you are clinging to the step of the ladder, then using the ladder to reach the top. And both Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism warn us against that.
So when you say that the ant of Ved is Vedanta, when I try to understand it from a more or in fact a less abstract way, what Ved and what is the ant in it really? So there are about 4 Vedas, and what is the ant of it that exactly is postulated in Advaita Vedanta?
Okay, so this is really a textual question. So there are the 4 Vedas. And all the 4 Vedas have 4 layers. The first layer is called mantra or Sanhita portion. The next one is called the Brahmana portion. The one after that is called the Aranyaka portion. And finally, the Upanishad portion. There are other divisions also, but this is one very popular division. In this division, Upanishads constitute the last section. The first is mantra or Sanhita. The second is Brahmana. The third is Aranyaka. The fourth is Upanishad. That is the end of the Vedas. Therefore, it is called Vedanta. You can also take it figuratively if you use the word Veda to mean spiritual knowledge. Not just the text, but the knowledge contained in the text. So Vedanta then means the final expression of the knowledge contained in the text. Or rather, the final conclusions about the spirit found in the last section of the Vedas. That combines the 2 levels of meaning of Vedanta, literal and metaphoric.
So, as a professor outside of India, in McGill, when you have a myriad of students coming from different walks of life, what are some interesting observations that you can make when you are teaching in a Judeo-Christian civilization about Advaita Vedanta? Because the ideas of monotheism or oneness, to be more exact, can be very different in both those areas. Or are they different?
There is not much difference when it comes to teaching the principles of Advaita Vedanta, whether in India or abroad, because it deals with universal principles, and the confusions are also universal. Confusing monism and monotheism, and polymorphism with polytheism, and misunderstanding Advaita Vedanta as the coming together of two things rather than that they were never separated. Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, what is the difference between monism and monotheism? What is the difference between Advaita Vedanta and Dvaita Vedanta?
Yeah, this is a very important question because earlier schemas of spiritual development, which were usually formulated in the West, started out often with animism. That is, imparting nature of the spirit to material objects. That's animism. Table or chair, to take a very crude example, you start worshipping them, you will start regarding them as possessing a spirit. This is animism. It's supposed to be the earliest stage of religious development. And then you get to polydemonism, there are many demons, polytheism. Then you get to henotheism, when you believe in more than one God, but serially. When you are praising one God, you regard it as the only God. And then you come to monotheism, you believe in only one God. This is as far as the Western evolution goes. But when you come to monism and to Advaita Vedanta says the idea of God is the last illusion to go. There is something beyond it, which in the West they call monism, but Advaita calls it a non-dualism.
So, what would be the difference between Advaita Vedanta and Dvaita Vedanta?
Advaita Vedanta believes in the existence of Saguna Brahman as the ultimate Brahman, ultimate reality. Advaita Vedanta believes in Nirgun Brahman as the ultimate reality. Now, I have to be very careful about this. Both the systems accept that Brahman has these two dimensions, with form, without form, with attributes, without attributes. The question is, which is its ultimate form? And Advaita Vedanta says it is Nirgun Brahman. Advaita Vedanta says it is Saguna Brahman. But this question is very difficult to resolve. And let me conclude the discussion with an example drawn from across the border, where we just had an election for the president. Now, which of these two do you think is more important? The presidency of the United States or the president of the United States? Can you have one without the other? No. But the question is, which is the ultimate? Without the presidency, you can't have a president. Without a president, you don't have the presidency. Similar kind of a paradox we get caught into when we talk of Nirguna and Saguna Brahma. And that is why there is this endless debate. Because you make a case for both.
So I think Advaita Vedanta talking about having faith to carry out the process, and in that being fundamentally different from the ideas of faith in Abrahamic religions. And also when you talk about how we must not confuse a map with a territory, and also the wonderful example that you gave about presidency and a president. I think those are some very important takeaways that I have had from this lecture today. Thank you very much for your insights. And this has really been a beginner's guide to Advaita Vedanta. We wish to have many such more talks with you. Namaste.
Namaste. You're welcome.